Dolphins fans, what's going on? It's the Fins Up Network. It's Ben Morgan, and it's time for the final preview and prediction video for the Week 13 game against the 49ers. And I'm not sure how you're feeling about this one, but I tell you what, I am so excited for this game. Like it's weird. It's not a divisional game. It's not even a conference game, but there's more. Feels like there's hype around this game. There's an anticipation around this game that we haven't felt in December in such a long time as Dolphins fans. It feels like it's like well-deserved. It's our time. We want to keep this win streak going. We want to keep Tua atop of that MVP conversation. So we all want to show up. We want to make a statement win here, get that national audience on our side, even though it's not flexed to the Sunday night football game like we all kind of hoped like the next week against the Chargers game is. But, man, I am pumped for this game. I'm going to go through some viewer questions that came in, got some good ones this week. So hopefully I caught most of them that came in. You guys have been crushing it with the viewer questions. So as I continue to go with this format on the final preview and prediction show, continue to bring it with those questions. They have been awesome. But before we jump into those and before we get to the prediction, I want to hear from you. Drop your Dolphins 49ers predictions in the comments. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you are getting subscribed. Well, let's jump in. Like I said, a lot of good ones to get to today. There's no shortage of storylines for the Dolphins 49ers. First question comes in. Does familiarity give either coach an advantage? I'll start by saying I don't think the amount of familiarity between McDaniel and Shanahan, I don't think it's going to be the end-all be-all. It's not going to decide the game. But if I had to give an advantage, I would actually give the advantage to Mike McDaniel for this reason. Think about the roles that Shanahan has been in. Shanahan's been offensive coordinator and head coach, and McDaniel's been kind of following around doing the underneath jobs, the run game coordinator, the offensive coordinator the last year in San Francisco. So it's been Shanahan's schemes, it's been Shanahan's game plans, and McDaniel has just kind of been the student in all of that. So McDaniel's been the one knowing like what Shanahan tries to accomplish, basically being in those meetings, being the listener, being the executor of that game plan. Whereas, yeah, you could say that McDaniel learned a lot of his offensive schemes and theories from Shanahan. But at the end of the day, while there's similarities between the Dolphins and the 49ers offense, they are not carbon copies of each other by any means. So Kyle Shanahan hasn't been in these meetings of Mike McDaniel, and he doesn't know the exact scheme and every single thing that Mike McDaniel is trying to execute. So I don't necessarily think, like I said, that it's going to be an end-all be-all. But if we're talking about an advantage, I gave a long-winded answer as to say I do think Mike McDaniel gets a small advantage in this situation. This next question is about the running game. Will Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson have extra swagger this week? Obviously, being former 49ers. And I combined this with another question because it was kind of similar. Over under 100 rushing yards. So let's start with the first one. So obviously, anytime you're going against a former team, there's a little something extra there. At the end of the day, though, I mean, these are world-class athletes. These are the 1% of the 1%. They're bringing it. They have to bring it every single week against this competition. But don't kid yourself. Yeah, if you're at a former team and you think they did you wrong, like we saw from Jeff Wilson, he said, you know what, when they brought in Christian McCaffrey, I was kind of puzzled by that. Kind of thought we were pretty good in the running back room. Liked it in San Francisco, didn't really think they needed to add an extra body, and Christian McCaffrey essentially made Jeff Wilson expendable at the trade deadline. So, yeah, you're going to want to go out. You're going to want to prove someone wrong. And at the end of the day, too, I mean, look at earlier in the week. You kind of had the Raheem Mostert and Deebo Samuel situation that it kind of got flattened, but essentially Deebo took it as Raheem Mostert taking shots at Jimmy G, which really wasn't the case, and that's really a non-story now. But like I said, just another added storyline to a game that has no shortage of storylines. So, yes, they're going to bring a little bit extra this week. And in regards to over under 100 yards, I think that's a good number. The Dolphins average 95 rush yards per game. San Francisco allows a league low 80. Here's the thing, though. Last week when we played the Texans against the league worst rush defense, I thought the game plan was going to be, let's give the ball to Jeff Wilson. Mostert wasn't going to be in, but let's give it to Wilson. Let's give it to either Ahmed or Gaskin and play to the other team's weakness. We didn't see that. Tua threw the ball 30 plus times in the first half. And I don't think we're going to see the exact opposite of that. I don't think that this is like, oh, we got a really good pass defense. Now we have to try, or we got a really good run defense and now we're going to run the ball. It's not going to be the exact opposite of what we saw last week. But I do think this is going to be another Tua passing game type of situation. So if you say 100, if I had to put money on it, I would likely say under. But what I want from the running game is to have something established that we can rely on, so we're not dropping back and letting those edge rushers run free every single play, because we cannot afford to have that because of the offensive line, which we'll get into here as another question comes up. I like this story that came out throughout the week as well. More damning information about Brian Flores. But why was Flores and his staff telling Tua not to use his trait of an eye manipulator, essentially? And that's a story that came out that Brian Flores essentially said throughout his first 2 years when Tua was the quarterback, didn't really want Tua playing eye games with the defense. And it's crazy to me because I watched all of Tua, essentially his time at Bama, thinking that the Dolphins have a good chance. We need a franchise quarterback. This guy is a top 1 or 2 quarterback in this draft. I'm going to dedicate a lot of time potentially watching a guy that could be our future quarterback. And obviously the accuracy was there. The big time game performances were there. But the thing that I loved the most was that eye manipulation. Tua knowing what his first read was going to be, but completely looking him off, getting that defense to do exactly what he wanted, and then firing it to the read that he actually wanted to do it. It was one of the best traits that he had. But why I think Flores did this is because Flores was such a defensive-minded coach, and he was good at it. He had a really good defense, don't get me wrong. But I think he thought he could kind of just play game manager on offense. Don't do anything crazy. Just stick to the script, get enough points, and we'll win a low-scoring battle because of our defense. And honestly, I think he just kind of felt lost offensively. Look what he brought in. He brought in a fossil in Chan Gailey. And I know that Ryan Fitzpatrick was technically the starter when Gailey was there, but then he continued to keep Gailey right away until Gailey decided to mutually part. However, that all worked out. But he didn't really seem to know what he was doing on the offensive side of the ball between Gailey and then between moving to how many offensive coordinators are we going to have? We're going to have co-offensive coordinators, but the quarterback coach is going to be the one bringing in the plays. You could just see the writing was on the wall that our offense wasn't going to be able to work this way. So it's probably, to answer the question, it was probably just a thing to simplify an offense, to dumb things down to a point where let's win the game with our defense and our offense can kind of just manage the game. I teased this next one, said we were going to talk about offensive line. The question is, will the offensive line and secondary rise to the occasion? So Friday, we got that final injury report. We know that Austin Jackson is definitely out for this game against the Niners. And Terron Armstead is listed as doubtful, got in a light practice on Friday, not officially ruled out. But more often than not, you got to think the safe money is on Shell starting at right tackle, Little starting at left tackle. Here's where I think you can potentially kind of rise to the occasion there. This injury didn't happen mid-game. You got a full week to prepare. Yes, it's inevitable that there's going to be a drop-off in performance. You don't just replace. You can kind of just replace a guy like Austin Jackson because we saw it in Brandon Shell. Brandon Shell has arguably been a much better option at right tackle than Austin Jackson has. So that doesn't really faze me all that much. But you can't replace a top 3 left tackle in this league with anyone, especially anyone that's in a reserve role. So it's inevitable that there's going to be a drop-off in performance. But with the amount of time that we had to prepare, with the amount of things that we talked about earlier in the week that you can do to kind of help mask a weakness on the offensive line and moving the pocket and adding a tight end and chipping with your fullback and your running backs, they've had time to prepare. So they're not going to come into this game with all this on the line, with all the former players and coaching staffs of the familiarity between the two teams. You're not coming into this one unprepared. Mike McDaniel prides himself on these details, on being prepared for games. So yes, I think the offensive line will rise to the occasion. And to touch on the secondary quick, Deebo Samuel's questionable in this game. Let's just put that out there first and foremost, because without him or with an injured Deebo Samuel, that changes things for the 49ers offense. We talk about how they've got Ayuk, they've got Kittle, they've got Christian McCaffrey. They've got guys that can beat you, but Deebo can beat you multiple ways. He takes quick passes, he takes immediate passes, he takes deep passes, he runs the ball. If he's banged up or if he's not 100%, that changes things. But also in regards to our secondary, yeah, we're beat up. We are definitely beat up. We're not playing with the unit that we thought we would this season. They've rised up. They've answered the occasion more often than not so far when they've needed to. So Yes, I think they will. Will there be a drop off in performance at the offensive line? Absolutely. That's inevitable. But I think that they can rise to the occasion. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I give my final score prediction. I loved this question. It's not particular to this game, but there's a lot that's been coming out this week about the Pro Bowl now that all the voting's going on. I don't know a ton about the voting, but the question is which Dolphins should make this year's Pro Bowl. And I don't think we're going to get all of the guys that I'm going to list, but I'm going to give my list of guys that I think are either kind of deserving or at least have a chance of making it. And my list is Tua. I mean, man, undefeated when he's started and finishing the game. The stats are all there. He's ranking first in QBR, quarterback rating, all of the advanced metrics that he's just crushing it in. Waddle and Hill, 2 top 5 wide receivers in regards to yardage. I mean, one of the most explosive offenses. And then on the offensive line, Terron Armstead. And what could hurt him are these injuries. You got to be able to be on the field. You got to get noticed. So Armstead deserves it. Might get hindered a little bit if he misses some time here. But then Robert Hunt as well. I got Robert Hunt on my list because he's been the mainstay. And he hasn't really had any bad games. And it's hard to be noticed as an offensive lineman at guard, at right guard especially. But man, he has been there, and Pro Football Focus has him ranked as like a top 6 guard in the league. So he's been holding his own as well. Wouldn't be surprised to have his name called for the first time in a Pro Bowl. And then defensively, I got Christian Wilkins. He's starting to become a little bit more of a household name. He's got double digits tackle for a loss, which I believe is like top 3 or 5 from all interior defensive linemen in the NFL. And he's kind of a splashy guy. He celebrates with the team. He gets out there. So people know who he is. And it's some fan voting in this as well, obviously. And then lastly, I would like to add an edge rusher. I love Jalen Phillips. I love Bradley Chubb. Melvin Ingram has just as many sacks as both of them. But I think that's an issue. I think the stats, because I always say there's more to the edge rushing position than just stats. But when it comes to the Pro Bowl, you either need to have a huge name or you need to have huge numbers. And our stats are just spread way too thin right now. So that's the list that I would have for the Pro Bowl. And I've got one more question here before I get to my prediction. And it's, do you think the defensive players are getting frustrated with how gutless Josh Boyer is? So I'm kind of torn on my answer to this one. And honestly, I think the Dolphins and their coaching staff, they realize that the defense doesn't necessarily need to be lights out. They don't need to be the ones winning the game, carrying the team. The offense is scoring points this year, especially the last, 4 or 5 weeks. You can kind of afford defensively to play a little bit more, bend but don't break, not have to force all these turnovers, not have to bring all these zero blitz pressures. But here's the deal with the defense, with the amount of injuries, we haven't been able to run the defense that we've wanted to coming into the season. We don't have the 2 guys on the island that you can put out there in Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. So we can't run all this zero pressure. And Brandon Jones isn't there anymore. And Javon Holland can't afford to be blitzing all the time because we need a little bit more of that shell coverage and that bend but don't break. So it's a little bit twofold for me. I'd like to be a little bit more aggressive. And I know in the original question, it was like, we got to let guys like Kader Kohu be on an island more, let them get more experience, see what we truly have. And I get that. And I'm kind of okay with that in certain situations. But I don't think the team feels that it's super necessary because they say, you know what, if we can keep the ball in front of us, if we can limit teams to just field goals or at least extend drives, our offense is scoring enough right now. We don't have to make all these splash plays on defense to the point where we sell out on defense and now we're getting beat over the top. So I'm a little bit twofold on this. I understand the question, but at the end of the day, I think the players kind of get it, and winning cures all. So I don't think they're super upset right now with anything, but we'll see how things go over this next stretch of games. Well, like I said, my prediction's up. And I'm doing it, Dolphins fans. I kind of talk myself into wins sometimes throughout the week because going into this game, I'm like, God, started the road trip. 49ers got a good defense. They excel in the pass rushing. I am scared shitless of Nick Bosa. We potentially are starting 2 backup tackles. I mean, the writing's on the wall almost like you can't win them all. I mean, statistically speaking, you hardly ever win them all. Win streaks like this, scoring 30-plus points per game, as many games as we have in a row, it doesn't happen all the time. What we're doing right now, offensively especially, is very special. And the defense, the last couple of games, when they've really been turning it on against the Browns and the Texans, has been great. We've been playing complementary football. So if there was time for I don't even want to call it a letdown, but for a loss, it could potentially happen this week. I'm not guaranteeing a Dolphins victory by any means, but I do think there's a couple of things the Dolphins have going for them. Offensively, Mike McDaniel, his time to prepare, his ability to create space for people, to be able to plan all week with these backup tackles, to be able to put something together that's going to work against a team that, yes, he is familiar with. He knows all about Nick Bosa. He knows all about this pass defense. He knows every single thing typically. I mean, there's a few things he's probably missed this year, but he knows a lot about what's going on with this team. I think he's going to have a game plan. Like I said, it's going to be a bit pass heavy, but he's going to understand the importance of mixing in the run as well. I just honestly think that his ability to game plan and be able to put Tua in situations to succeed, I think Tua gets it done enough through the air. Because if you look at, and I don't even want to call the 49ers secondary a weakness, but if there's something that's not as strong on their defense, their linebackers are great. Their pass rushing is great. If there's a weakness on their defense, it's their secondary. And I think guys like Tua and Waddle are perfect to exploit any secondary. Even the best secondaries in the league, these guys can exploit with their speed. So I think the Dolphins can do enough offensively, get 24 points. But, man, that's putting it on our defense as well to hold this team to 20. And I don't think the 49ers are this offensive juggernaut, and their starting left tackle is questionable as well. He left Friday's practice with back spasms. So who knows what's going to happen there, because our pass rush can cause fits for teams as well. Deebo Samuel is questionable. This game, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a war. There's a lot going on this game. Like I said, there's a lot of storylines, no shortage there. I think it's going to be a hard-fought battle. Could see this game being decided by a field goal either way. End of the day, I do think the Dolphins have enough to get this done. We continue on that win streak. And that's kind of what I've got for this one, Miami Dolphins fans. But I want to hear from you as well. Drop your final score predictions in the comments. Let's carry on the conversation there up until game time. And then I will be back at some point on Sunday night with my recap and takeaways from the Dolphins 49ers games. But that's what I've got for today, Dolphins fans. And until Sunday night, fins up.